Welcome to everybody that's joining us this morning. As I've said, it is the start of the National Village Halls Week, which is the first time ever that it's been done. It's Village Halls Safeguarding Week, and it's part of a national project which is funded through, it's a £1.1 million big lottery and government funding project that ACRE is part of. Now, if you're new to these training events and not familiar with RAD as a Village Halls Advisory Service, when I refer to ACRE, that is our national body, and they're called Action with Communities in Rural England. ACRE provide all the sort of the information and the resources that we use to support village halls with. They've provided all the information that we've been able to pass down to village halls to do with the COVID and the reopening of village halls. So all of the legal requirements and actions and things that are eligible and not eligible, it's all been provided through ACRE. So they are our national body, and we couldn't survive without them and wouldn't be able to provide the Village Halls service. So a lot of the information and this particular project is funded, well, they got the funding for this project. So Village Halls Week is this week, which is the 16th to the 23rd of November. And in Derbyshire, this is the main event that we're doing. We're providing this training free of charge. So it's great that you're able to join us. But also, as part of the Village Halls Safeguarding Week, it's to provide, there's going to be a lot of social media, and it's trying to raise awareness of the importance of the safeguarding requirements that charities and all organisations and individuals are meant to be aware of. So this is to kickstart Safeguarding Week. So we hope to improve your awareness through training and support to promote a safe culture within charities. But also, as well as that, it's to provide a lot of information about where you can get extra information and extra resources around safeguarding. So if you go onto our the RAD website, for example, there is a specific safeguarding page that's been set up thanks to Emma. And on that page, you will find a big list of other organisations that we can signpost you to, and the links to get to those organisations. So there's a wealth of information about safeguarding out there. So, you know, after this training, hopefully you'll have a copy of the slides, and there are links to all these other organisations as well on the slides that Emily has developed. So do use this as a package, not just the training today, but use it as a package where you can access much more information and all of those resources. So I'm not actually delivering the training. That's going to be done by a colleague of mine, Emily. Emily's got a lot of experience in this area, and she is the project lead at RAD for the Willow project, and that is around domestic abuse in rural areas. So Emily has got an excellent background and the knowledge of these sort of issues. So we've asked Emily to deliver this on behalf of the Village Halls service. So we're kick-starting 10:30. We'll go through to 11:15, and then we'll have a 15-minute break, comfort break. After that, if you have any questions, you know, you can post them via chat that Emma has already explained, or put your hand up, whatever mechanism you want. So we've got half an hour session there that will just be an informal opportunity to raise those questions. You may be able to input some information yourselves. You may have some experience of a safeguarding issue, you know, perhaps at your village hall. So any input that we can get from you, that will be really interesting as well. And then Emily will finish off for the last half an hour talking about the safeguarding reporting, what you have to do to report a safeguarding issue, and all those useful resources and websites that we've been talking about. So I will now shut up and pass to Emily to start the session. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Helena. So, can we have the next slide, please, Emma? Thank you. So, just quickly before I talk about this, I've done a lot of safeguarding training with the Church of England in my role as a Sunday school lady, and also I'm the safeguarding lead for Derbyshire Young Farmers. So, so hopefully I know what I'm talking about a little bit. So the aims of today's session is to reinforce that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. There's no way around that. If you see something, you have to do something about it. And to provide a basic awareness of adult and children's safeguarding. Now, if we were to do an in-depth presentation about all the different types of safeguarding, it would take, of abuse, pardon me, it would take far too long. It would take a lot longer than 2 hours. So I'm just going to go over a basic awareness and some little elements that you might not have thought about that we think pertain to village halls. And by the end of the session, you should be able to understand what safeguarding means, be able to recognise some signs and respond appropriately, know your responsibilities as trustees and committee members, and most importantly, know how to report any concerns about things that you might have seen or heard within your village hall and the agencies which use your village hall. So what is safeguarding? So this is a statement here. It's the action that's taken to promote the welfare of children and adults at risk and protect them from harm. So adults can also be in need of safeguarding support. We often think of safeguarding as children and around adults abusing children, unfortunately. However, there is situations where adults might also be a safeguarding issue, and that's something we'll touch on in a moment. Next slide, please. So safeguarding means protecting children from abuse and maltreatment, protecting harm to children's health or development, ensuring children grow up with the provision of safe and effective care, and taking action to enable children and people to have the best outcomes in life. So again, this just gives you an overview of what we're looking at. So when we talk about protecting children from abuse and maltreatment, it's unlikely that you're going to see something happen within your village halls. As trustees, you might not even be in the village hall when a children's party or a kids yoga event is even happening. But it's still your responsibility, should you hear or get any feedback from anyone that there's signs of abuse or suspicion around signs of abuse, it's still your role as a trustee to follow that up. And that's one of the main things that ACRE really has been reinforcing, and also the Charities Commission, that even it's still your responsibility. Basically, it's everyone's responsibility. You can't just say, well, the yoga club, the yoga group, it's happening in their time, it's one of their clients, they have to deal with it. If you know about it, you also need to follow it up. Some of you may have heard about Baby P several years ago now, and Victoria Climbier, and the issue there was everybody thought somebody else was doing something about it. So that's why they fell through the gaps and nothing was ever followed up, because all the agencies involved all thought everyone else was reporting and they weren't. So if you get nothing else out of today, I just really want to stress that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and you as a trustee of the hall must follow up anything you hear or see. So just, yeah, safeguarding again, it's about preventing harm to a child's health or development. So it's not just about physical abuse and bruising. It's about, you know, children that are maybe children or young people that are maybe getting shouted at unnecessarily by the parents. You know, it's when you can tell something's just not quite right, because you can have emotional abuse as well as physical abuse. Ensuring children grow up with the provision of safe and effective care and taking action. So next slide, please, Emma. Thank you. Adult safeguarding means protecting an adult's right to live in safety, free from abuse and neglect. And now the Care Act has a quote on this, which is, it's about people and organisations working together to prevent and stop both the risks and experience of abuse or neglect, whilst at the same time making sure that the adult's well-being is promoted, including where appropriate, having regard to their views, wishes, feelings and belief in deciding on any action. Now, with the more mature generation, we need to think about the safeguarding of their dignity and their liberty. It's something that, again, you might have elderly, like U3A, agencies like that using your village hall. It's remembering that these people in the more elderly generation, I'm not sure if you're supposed to call them OAPs anymore. Maybe you could put the answer to that in the chat. They can often have their emotions neglected as well. If you have any daycare centres coming in and using your village hall, it's keeping your eye out for abuse in terms of their dignity. Now, my granddad was always a gentleman that used to wear a shirt and a tie and you know, a waistcoat or a pullover, whatever that's what he wore when he got up in the morning. And I remember being told about someone that went to a nursing home and saw a gentleman that sounded just like my granddad, that had always got dressed up in the morning, but was sitting in the nursing home with a t-shirt and jogging bottoms on, like a Bob Marley t-shirt, something that he never would have worn. And that's an abuse of their dignity, you know, dressing them in clothes that they probably wouldn't have chosen to wear. And that's something you might come across in your village hall. As I say, if you get daycare services coming to use your village hall. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Emma? Just one second. And there we go. Safeguarding, again, is everyone's responsibility. This is going to keep popping up because I'm going to make sure you remember. So a child is anyone under the age of 18. And that's important to remember because it gets a bit blurry between 16 and 18, I think, doesn't it? We often think of 16-year-olds as more like adults nowadays, but still, according to the law and the United Nations Convention, a child is anyone below the age of 18. And just a reminder here that a child cannot hire a hall in their own name. It's clearly stated on the acre model hiring agreement that a child cannot hire a hall because a child cannot enter a contract by law. They also can't be complicit in any types of abuse up to the age of 18. They're still a child. The next slide, please. And then looking at an adult at risk of harm. So this could be someone who has care and support needs, whether they're provided through the local authority. There could be someone that's experiencing or is at risk of abuse or neglect, and this is where you might be thinking of your people, elderly people with learning disabilities, social and emotional disabilities and problems. So they could be at risk of abuse or neglect. Or someone who, as a result of their care and support needs, is unable to protect themselves from either the risk of or the experience of abuse or neglect. So that's sort of those are definitions of what an adult at risk of harm is. But it's also important to remember that people can be vulnerable for a short amount of time. This could be during an illness, during a time maybe where their close family have gone away on holiday. That's not going to happen at the moment, but after COVID, you know, if they're left alone without their normal support systems for a short amount of time, that can make them more vulnerable. But also they can stop being vulnerable as well. So as I say, don't forget that they can be vulnerable for a short amount of time, but they can also stop being vulnerable. So recognizing signs of abuse. What can you see there? This is, I don't mind if you want to unmute yourselves for a moment. I know you've probably all seen this before, but what can you see? Or do you want to pop it in the chat? I'm hoping you can either see a rabbit or a duck.
Both.
Or both, yes. A rabbit and a duck, yeah. I like to think of it as a rabbit, because it's quite an ugly rabbit though, let's face it, because I've got rabbits at home. So a duck. I think what I'm trying to put in there is that people see things differently. So some of us are seeing the rabbit, some of us are seeing the duck, some of us are seeing both. And it's just a reminder that when you see a situation of what you think might be abuse, other people might not consider that to be abuse or neglect. It could be just yourselves, but that doesn't mean that your thoughts and your opinions don't matter. Safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. And vice versa, somebody could come to you saying, I'm not happy about this child in my art group that I do, and you might think, well, I've seen the child, they look fine. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. If somebody sees something that they're not happy with, report it. If it's not a problem, then all's well, you've done your duty. But if it you know, if it is a problem and you don't report it, who knows what will happen. Can we go on to the next one? So people that are at risk of abuse, children, obviously, anyone under the age of 18. People dependent on others for assistance. So again, those that need someone to help them physically, a carer to help them physically if they have a physical disability, if they're a wheelchair user. People who need support with intimate care, but also people who are dependent on others for their finances. People who lack the capacity to consent, so we're looking at people with learning difficulties there, or cognitive issues. People who need support with communication, so that can be those whose first language isn't English. And we're looking at people who use British Sign Language there as their first language, or if you're helping any of the refugee communities. and other people, so the people who are visually impaired might also need help with communication and might need large print documents to help make sure they know what they're doing when they're signing up for something. People who need support with mobility, as I've said, people who are isolated, and that doesn't just mean isolated geographically, although that is an issue, but people who are isolated within their community for whatever reason, they can be at increased risk of abuse. And people receiving care within their own home, again, they're all people who are at risk of abuse.
Can I add something, Emily, there?
Yeah.
Because especially in rural areas, and if they are maybe retired people, so they may not go out to work or have many other outlets, sometimes going to the village hall may be the only time that they actually see other people. So it's vitally important that the village halls take it seriously, because the people that are using the hall, you know, it might be their only way that they're seeing and socializing and receiving services, or you know, going to maybe a community shop or a community cafe. It may be the only opportunity that those people can be visible. So people who are running groups from village halls are responsible, but equally trustees themselves need to be aware that the people, everybody and anybody that you know, goes into their premises is in a way their safeguarding responsibility. So you know, it may be that people don't go outside their village very often. So you know, the village hall is a vital asset, community facility within villages. So to be aware of that you know, village hall trustees have got that responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So I wanted to just briefly talk, because obviously safeguarding is never a nice subject to talk about, but some types of abuse that you might not have thought of. Now, as I say, I hope you're all aware of things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, where we're talking around things with children and young people. But there's a few types of abuse that you may not have considered that I think I feel are quite pertinent to the village hall situation. Those are neglect, self-neglect and hoarding, financial abuse, and the county lines. Now, I'll start with the county lines, even though that's at the bottom. You may or may not have heard of this. So this is where young people are being encouraged to, they're being recruited and then used to deliver drugs in and out of the county. So I don't know, I can't remember if we've got anyone from up Glossop area, where obviously you're really close to Manchester and all that area. There are people actively recruiting children to then deliver the drugs into Derbyshire. Now, we have to remember here again that a child cannot consent to this. Even if they're delivering the drugs, they're not consenting, they're under 18. So you might think, you might see that child and think, oh, he's a troublemaker, you know, it's their own fault. Well, no, they're under 18. You need to do something about it. I was in a meeting for with the deanery, the Carsington deanery of Derbyshire, with the church, and we had a message that this situation is going on in the daytime, and church halls and village halls are specifically being targeted as a place where transactions can take place. I can't remember which village hall it was, which church hall it was, sorry, but they've actually had to put up cameras because of issues around this. So yes, I think maybe, I am just assuming, but the young people doing this drug dealing, which is what it is, are thinking that church halls and village halls won't be as monitored at the moment. They won't be, people aren't using them at the moment, so that's where we'll do our transactions. So just something to bear in mind, and also to highlight that it's not just the Glossop area that's at risk. The whole of Derbyshire, this is county lines is going on throughout the whole of Derbyshire, unfortunately. So that's a lovely little piece of information there for you. I wanted also to look at neglect, self-neglect and hoarding. Now, this can be something that is more prevalent with the elderly. The self-neglect, maybe not eating properly, maybe not coming to the village halls. You know, they're not clean. Maybe not the clothes aren't clean. It's just, again, like Helena was saying, if this is the only outlet, the only place where this person gets any social interaction, it's your responsibility to say to Bob or whatever, are you doing okay? Are you, you know, is there anything I can do for you? Because if they're neglecting themselves, if they're not looking after themselves, they may just want that one person to step in and just check they're all right. And then neglect, we're talking about the neglect of maybe the elderly. Again, it does go on in young people, but that they're being given access to any healthcare they might need, any medications that they might need, that family are making sure that their elderly relatives, friends, relatives are okay. So that's another thing just to bear in mind, and to remember that it is your responsibility to flag this up if you're really not happy. Financial abuse. This is something I've experienced. Well, I've experienced myself. I used to work for the NatWest Bank, and I remember two gentlemen in particular. One came in and he'd received an email from a prince in Nigeria who wanted to help him. He wanted help to get some money from England, and all this gentleman needed to do was send his passport details over and his driving license and his bank account number, and then they would transfer the money from this oil line or something like that. And I'm sure you all know what's going off there. It was obviously one of the spam emails that seemed to come from various different countries on a regular basis. Now, this elderly gentleman hadn't been using the internet for long, and he'd received this email and he thought it was real. And obviously it was my duty to inform him that this isn't real. They're asking you to send your driving license and your passport details and your bank account and a copy of your signature. But this gentleman couldn't get that. He said, he told me I was being racist, and this could really be, you know, it could be, I want to help this person out in Nigeria. But I had to tell him that I wouldn't carry out the transaction that he was asking me to, and neither would anyone else in the bank, and that I felt he should go to the police and get some help with his internet security as well. But that's something that you need to consider if you see, if you just making sure your more elderly community are aware of different things that could happen to them financially. There was also another case of a gentleman whose wife had recently died, and he'd actually been picked up through one of the bereavement adverts in a newspaper, you know, Gladys, wife of John, died, etc. So John was contacted. That's not his real name, but John was contacted by people in Spain who, to cut a long story short, managed to convince him to send almost $250,000 over to Spain to build a house. And unfortunately, in that case, because the man was had no problems with his cognitive ability, we as the people in the bank had to make those transactions. But if somebody else close to him could have said, are you sure this is a real house in Spain, John? Are you sure you should be sending all this money out? Then maybe the situation had been different. And he died whilst I still worked at the bank, and his family found out he'd sent $250,000 over to Spain. So yes, just different things that I wanted to highlight to you that you might not have considered as types of abuse, and things to just keep your eye on and check that nothing's going on that you wouldn't want to happen to your own parents, really. Right, so how to respond. Next slide again. That's just a filler slide, Emma. So dealing with a disclosure. If anyone, again, remembering it can be any age, from a child, a young person to the elderly, or even it could be a disclosure of a domestic abuse so it could be any age group. The main thing to do is to stay calm and listen. Offer reassurance. Don't promise that you can or are going to do anything, because you don't know what you can or can't do to help them. Don't at any point, if a disclosure is made and they ask you not to tell anyone, you need to say, this is a safeguarding issue, I have to report this. So be transparent about what you can and what you will be doing with the information. I recently did have to go through a safeguarding disclosure, and although the person that was speaking to me said she'd already disclosed, but she said, if I go now to the doctors and tell them, they can't say anything, can they? Because she was thinking of patient-client confidentiality. And I had to explain that no, a doctor would do exactly the same. A disclosure has been made, it needs to be passed on to the relevant services. No matter how much this young person asked me not to, the disclosure had been made, I had to pass it on to the relevant services. So record, if you can do, make notes at the time of the disclosure if that is appropriate. It's always better if it's over the telephone, because they can't, tell them you're writing the notes, but it's different than being in person and sitting there writing notes. Don't ask leading questions. Let them do the talking. It's really hard, but if you can, try and remain silent and let them talk, and let them talk about things, rather than, as it says, leading questions. So did he do this, or did she do that to you? Then just let them talk, and consider the person's immediate safety. Now, if you think that a person, a child, young person, or an adult is in immediate danger, then you ring 999. If you don't feel they're in immediate danger, then you would let them go back to their home, the place where they live, and take it on from there. It's only if you think the person is in immediate danger, and not just physical danger, immediate psychological, severe psychological danger, you would ring 999. Can we have the next slide? So if you are concerned about a child, you need to explain this to the parents, unless, of course, it's the parents that are the worry. You would need to explain to them, a disclosure has been made, I'm going to have to follow this up, and then and then make a referral. That's going to be on slides further on in the presentation, but make a referral. Doing nothing is not an option. Again, if there's no issues, if it was just you were looking at the duck the wrong way and actually it was the rabbit, that's fine. You've done your duty as a trustee you've done your safeguarding duty, there's no problem, then all's well. But if actually there was an issue and you didn't report, where does it go from there? I know I'm repeating myself. I just want to make sure that you get the message that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So just remember, doing nothing is not an option. In an emergency, call 999. I don't think, my dad was a policeman for 30 odd years. I don't think a policeman would ever mind if they were called out to a safeguarding issue that turned out not to be a safeguarding issue. Just call 999 if you think someone's in immediate danger. Now, we're a little bit early. I've obviously been talking a lot faster than I thought I would. So it's now break time. I don't know, Emma and Helena, if you want to come back 5 minutes early or give them an extra 5 minutes break time.
I think come back early, because if the session does finish before the full time, that gives, I'm sure everybody's got busy lives. So we can finish early if necessary. But okay. Just to reiterate what you said on that last slide, Emily, there's a phenomena called bystander apathy in public places. Because if you see something or witness something, out in the street, for example, and you see somebody who looks like they're a drunkard in a shop window, doorway, people tend to walk by, ignore it. They think that it's not my responsibility, or they witness some abuse in the street. Nobody reports it because they all think somebody else has already reported it. And that is that bystander apathy. Everybody's apathetic because they think it's not my responsibility. So safeguarding legislation is totally the opposite to that. As you've said, Emily, reiterate
numerous times,
everybody's responsibility, and it's better that it's reported, from more than one person than not at all. Mm-hmm. So, and it is a legal responsibility. It's not just a moral. It is moral responsibility, but it is in statute. It is a legal responsibility. So you're not fulfilling the law and charity law, because charity law says that as a trustee you have to act in the best interests of the charity. So whatever you do, you've got to put the charity's interests, and it's your charity's interest to look after your beneficiaries. So you've got to safeguard the charity as well as the people that are using the charity, because we can mention insurance later on. But they've got insurance implications to the actual charity. So it's your duty of care to everybody, including the charity or the organisation that you're working for. It could be a parish council, whatever business it is, or a shop. It doesn't matter what the organisation it is. The law applies to charities in the same way as it does to every other type of organisation. So if anybody wants to raise questions on the insurance implications as well, we can talk about that in that half an hour session after we've had the coffee break. So if you have any questions, you may have already put them in the chat to Emma. If not, we can just have a discussion about what Emily's already talked about. And we can expand on anything that you may not be sure about. And then we're going to finish off with Emily's last slides before we finish. So it's virtually 1:15, so we can come back just before 1/2. Is that okay? Right. Are we screen sharing, Emma?
Yes. Patience.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
So Q&As. This is probably a bit where Helena might pop in. I have got some slides after this specifically pertaining to responsibilities as trustees and some of the latest guidance from ACRE, which was sent out. Was it Friday, Helena, I think?
Yes, I think you got it last night, Emily. So yes, you've done really well.
Just snuck that one in. So yeah, we have got some slides about those, about the latest guidance from ACRE coming up. But if there's anything you wanted to ask at the moment, please go ahead.
Can I ask something? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Sarah?
Can you hear me? Hi. 2 questions. First of all, is it mandatory for trustees to have safeguarding training, and if so, who does it? And secondly, what about DBS clearance for trustees of village halls?
Now,
I deal with the training bit and you deal with the DBS part of that, Emily. Is that okay? Or do you want to?
yeah.
Well, trustees have a responsibility when they join a village hall committee. They have to sign they should sign a form to say that they agree with all the terms and conditions of the charity. So that's one of the key things that they have to do. But it's also up to the charity to provide the new trustee with trustee induction training. So yes, it is a requirement for them to do trustee induction training. And they have to know fully what their responsibilities are as charity trustees. They have to have copies of the trust deed and copies of all the policies and procedures. So that would, hopefully, the village hall would have a safeguarding policy. So they would be given that as part of the whole package as becoming a trustee. It's and if there should be a safeguarding lead as well on the, one of the trustees would be selected as a safeguarding lead, and it would be their responsibility to sort of induct that new person into their responsibilities.
So the safeguarding lead is me. I'm not a trustee. I'm a paid part-time member of staff. Previously to this, I was a head teacher in a DSL in schools, but our hall deals mostly with older folk. And I have been to the county training, which, to be quite honest, was quite low level compared to what I've been used to in the past. But it's a case of what do we do, or what do we need to do to make sure that we are not just compliant, but following best practice?
They don't have to necessarily go on a formal training unless they want to do that. I mean, there's no, you can't have too much training. It isn't sort of standard practice to send a brand new trustee on a formal training. It's probably sufficient for the safeguarding lead to provide them with the appropriate information and the policy from the village hall, and to go through it with them so they fully understand what that means. So I think that.
How often should the DSL or the safeguarding lead have their training updated?
I'm not sure. Do you know the answer to that, Emily?
Well, as the Church of England, we have to update ours every 5 years, I believe it is. So, and I'm having to redo all my, no, I beg your pardon, 3 years. I'm having to do all my safeguarding training again. So, I don't know about village halls, but I know other agencies, for example, the Church of England, you have to renew all your DBS and all your training every 3 years. You
see, that's not even the case, because if people subscribe to the DBS update service, you don't need to renew your yeah.
That's relatively new, I believe.
A couple of years, Alison, several years.
Is it? Oh,
yeah.
I beg your pardon. I've only literally just, I don't think they talk about it very often. Do they not make much money out of it? Alison Smith mentioned.
Well, it's very tricky, because when you apply for it, you get it back, you then just have, I think it's a 2-week window for the subscription. But it's not very well publicised at all.
No.
But it's been around for several years.
Right, yeah, I've only just learnt about that. Alison Smith popped up. She said she was a DBS lead. Alison?
Yeah, so I was a DBS lead for an NHS organisation, and we could actually carry out DBS assessments. So I was the person signing all the forms when people fill it in and send it off and stuff. So I've got quite an in-depth knowledge of DBS. So the reality is the update service is for individuals that are required to have a DBS to do their registered activity, in a sense. And the reality is when a DBS check is ran, it's actually only valid on the day. The following day, you could go and commit a crime and get prosecuted for it, and it wouldn't be there. Now, the whole point of the update service is really that it costs you something like £13 a year. Those individuals that need to have it, so for example, working with children, you know, teaching assistant, working with vulnerable adults, for example, if you're going for jobs and things like that, or you need to prove that you currently have a clear DBS or have something on it that won't impact on the ability to deliver the service that you're going to be doing, then it's well worth paying that £13. It's tax deductible and things like that, so you know, people can claim it back off their tax, and because it's a requirement like a professional registration in some respects. So that's what that DBS checking service is. So we could, for example, or the village hall could register to check somebody's DBS registration through the update service, and what that means is they would give us a reference number, the individuals, and then we can look them up and they'll confirm whether or not you'll basically be able to see the DBS that was run and any updates that were that may have happened since that DBS was run. So I think for a lot of people that need a DBS on a regular basis, they will use that service because it's beneficial to them, it costs them less, because otherwise, if you're changing jobs and you're having to have your DBS rerun, it's in the region of £60, something like that, to get it rerun every time that you need it. So, you know, it's far cheaper just do it once and subscribe to the update service. But in terms of DBS checks, somebody asked a question about DBS checks for
trustees.
That's actually not a legal requirement. You have to be extremely careful around DBS checking. So DBS checks are only required if they meet the category of safeguarding vulnerable adults and children. So that is the reason for it, or where somebody is in a high position of power, that there is a potential, quite a serious potential around finance.
Well, that's it. That's my point, really, because the trustees of our charity are obviously overseeing quite a lot of money.
Yeah, it all depends on your level of finances that you have within your, you know, that's a personal choice. What I'm saying is it's not a legal requirement for trustees to have a DBS check. Yeah. Even the treasurer, what you really should be doing is ensuring that your policies and your practices and your auditing and governance arrangements are sufficiently tight that things would flag extremely quickly if there was any concerns.
Thank you.
Hope that helps.
Thank you, Alison. I didn't have to do anything then. I mean, just listening to you, I'm setting up a charity myself, and we will have our trustees DBS checked. Just, I feel it's good practice, and I believe DBS checks, I'll go on to this in a moment, but a lot of the local CVSs will do DBS checks for voluntary organisations. I think that's right, Helena, isn't it?
Yeah, it may well be, depends on the level of DBS check. If you're looking at an enhanced check, it's actually illegal to run an enhanced check unless you meet the categories to run. There is a standard check, there's an enhanced check, and then there's like there's another one that is quite superficial.
Basic, yeah.
Yeah, like a basic one. And the reality is
99, like
enhanced check for a trustee wouldn't meet the criteria unless those individuals were responsible for the delivery of services to vulnerable adults or children. And what I mean is they're the ones carrying them out. Don't require DBS check.
Thank you. That's helped me.
Because the reality is the person that's signing off the request for the check, and people won't know this unless you've actually done that job, which is what I've done, is as an individual, when you're signing the form to say, I want to have this person go through an enhanced check, you have to sign to say that they meet the criteria and in which way they meet the criteria. And if you request a check to be carried out that doesn't meet the legal requirements of the law, as an individual, you can personally be fined up to £10,000 in prison for up to 6 months. Oh. So I'd be very concerned if CVSs were carrying out an enhanced check on trustees, because they wouldn't meet the legal requirement for an enhanced check. So it's certainly something that you need to be mindful of, that whoever's doing it on your behalf, they should know if they're the person signing the form, because personally I refused to sign a lot in my organisation, and it went back up to CEOs and trust boards, etc., because they didn't understand the legalities of when you can and can't run a DBS check, an enhanced DBS check at that.
Unless, of course, one of your trustees was carrying out one of the crochet club or something like that. In which case
it's only if they're providing a service for vulnerable adults. If what you're doing is providing a community-run group and individuals attend that on a voluntary basis, that doesn't meet the requirement for enhanced check or a children's check. So only if you're providing a specific service for vulnerable adults. So for example, if you were running a group where individuals don't have the choice whether they attend. So if you work in a care home, for example, and that care home is running or getting somebody in to deliver, massage therapy, for example, to those people in the care home, and the individuals themselves sort of don't really, they just sort of go along with it or whatever. The individual providing it would need a DBS check, because they're obviously going to be potentially in a room on their own with an individual where undressing may take place, all of those things. If somebody's attending a crocheting club, sitting around in a group, and somebody's helping them knit or crochet, that doesn't meet the requirements of a DBS check. What you can do is actually go online and have a look at legal requirements for an enhanced DBS check. So you just need to check, because the criteria of when you can and can't request one is quite significant. So just being a community run group that is aimed at specific individual age groups, for example, does not require you to have a DBS check.
Thanks, Alison. I'm going to definitely look through that. I'm just finding the work that I do on the Willow project around domestic abuse, I'm just thinking about coercion and control. I'm just discussing now, I'm not sort of, because you don't need to be undressed, or the children or adults or young people don't need to be undressing to be in a where they could have someone in a position of power over them.
No, it's not necessarily just about undressing. That was just an example I was giving. But for example, if somebody runs a play group, for example, so an individual at your village halls runs a play group, and parents attend with their children to that play group. They pay a £5 or whatever it is they pay, and it's a voluntary thing, and they come and go. The individual actually running that play group does not require a DBS check, because they are not left alone
with the children.
And this is the thing. So if you're running a group, so if you're running a domestic abuse support group, for example, depending on what you're doing in that group as to whether, as the individual delivering that session, requires to have it. So you as the trustee may not require it, but the person delivering the support session may, dependent on the activities that they are carrying out with those individuals. And it's all about the activities you'll be doing and the situations you will find yourself in with those individuals as to whether it's whether it's legally, you can legally request one at an enhanced level.
Yeah. Well,
hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. I'm going to.
It's a really complex subject.
Yeah.
And most people just assume, oh, I'm doing this, therefore I need a DBS check. And actually, the reality is, no, you don't. Secondly, they shouldn't be requesting it either.
And am I right in
get
thinking
yourself
that
into trouble as a community, as a charity trustee, if you're illegally requesting DBS checks?
Yeah.
And am I right in thinking that people are not deemed as vulnerable just because of their age?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you think about it, if you just because somebody is 70 years old or 80 years old does not, vulnerable. There's a criteria which classes it vulnerable. So it's normally people that perhaps have learning disabilities, have physical or mental impairment or disabilities that could put them in a vulnerable position. It's not that at all. A child isn't necessarily vulnerable. It's all about what you're doing with that child and when and how, and whether you're on your own with them and all of those things. So if you look on, I'll find the link and I'll send it on to Helena for categories, and then you can have a look to your heart's content then, and hopefully it might help.
That's really great, Alison. That's sort of obviously your experience from handling this directly. It's given a really, really good insight into this, but it does show and highlight it's actually more complex when it comes to the DBS. So that link will be really, really helpful.
No problem.
Thank you. Yeah, but I think especially in COVID, and it's coming up to the winter now, sort of mental health and things that are hidden. So it's not just all elderly people we need to be aware of. Anybody of any age group, they say there's going to be this explosion of mental health concerns amongst people. Things like seasonal affective disorder is often hidden. We don't understand, or we don't recognise necessarily that somebody's feeling really, really down. And it's just being aware, isn't it? This has nothing to do with the DBS. It's just general safeguarding in general. So how we, as it's the Village Hall as an organisation has to sort of get the governance in place and the systems, the policies and procedures, and make it become standardised within the organisation, that everybody is sort of thinking along those terms. So rather than sort of something at the back of their mind, it should be something as it's a health and safety issue, and it should be treated as highly as making your premises health and safety, the physical premises. You wouldn't have hazards within your hall. You wouldn't have trip hazards, hopefully. You wouldn't have cables directly, electric risks or fire risks. As trustees, you take measures to mitigate the risks, and safeguarding is just the same as any other health and safety issue. But I think in many cases, many organisations, it's not seen in the same way as a health and safety issue, and it's getting that mindset into the organisation to think about health and safety, fire safety, safeguarding. It's just another one of the things that they have to do, and it is a legal and a moral responsibility as well.
Helena, Sarah Brooksby's got a hand up.
Sorry, Sarah. Yep.
Just coming back to what you were saying a moment ago about mental health, one of the concerns that we have with the forced closure of our day centre is that a lot of the people that would usually come to us are now forced into isolation, and their mental health is really suffering. They can't meet up with anybody else. They often don't have families nearby, and it's very difficult to know what we can do to support them.
Well, as a Village Hall committee, it's not necessarily obviously your responsibility, but if you can provide services or be aware of their needs and make those services available, that is one way that you can support them. But
yeah, we've been making referrals, but it's often they don't meet a threshold. It's just that they're lonely, or they want to chat, or it's very difficult. And some of them are not able to use the telephone very easily because of hearing difficulties.
Yeah, so isolation and loneliness it's an increasing difficulty and problem to address, and it's highlighted in rural communities. It's people are more spread out, you are isolated, and if some villages may not have a meeting place at all, So it is crucial that the village halls, you know, try and stay open if possible. Lockdown isn't helping because even if there are some eligible activities that can take place in village halls, a lot of village hall trustees have taken the view that they have got to close. So they are just saying, okay, we're just not opening our doors at all for a month, even though they may be allowed legally to have, you know, the older people's groups still carrying on, the play groups carrying on, some other activities that are trying to address, you know, the mental health issues. So it's so difficult to keep abreast of what you can and can't do. So I'm going to send out another e-bulletin hopefully later today that might help clarify what you can and can't do. We did send an information sheet out when the new lockdown came in on the 5th of November. That's been updated, so there'll be a little bit more what sort of activities are going to be permitted. So
those bulletins are very helpful, really helpful.
Yeah, I think for all of us, I mean, it's all come from ACRE, and they have managed to interpret the legislation, which is very, very difficult to, because there's lots of different sectors, you know, the retail and hospitality, the venue sectors, there's performing arts sectors, and the legislation is coming down into each of those sectors, and sometimes they're not, sometimes they don't say the same message. So it's interpreting the legislation has been very, very complex. Thankfully, we at RAD haven't had to do that. It's been done at ACRE. And if there's any ambiguities, they have got back to government and said, actually, this isn't straightforward. Can you please explain? Can you change the guidance? And the government have responded actually quite a few times. So they are listening to the feedback that, you know, from grassroots level village halls, feeding back through their county organisations. We feed it into ACRE and they're feeding it into the government. So it has worked that messages coming from the grassroots levels have fed into the legislation as well. So keep it coming. Any information or you know, comments, do send them to me at RAD or Emma, and you know, we can feed that back to ACRE as well. So I hope that's answered your question, Sarah, with the safeguarding. Yeah. Any more questions? Emily, have you got any?
No, I don't think so. There was just the chats, but I think they've all been dealt with. Yeah.
I've just put a couple of links in for the DBS for people. So one is the legal bits around it, but there's also the second one is if you're employing somebody, ask your series of questions to say, are they doing this? Are they doing that? Are they providing X, Y, and Z? And it will tell you what you're entitled to run, whether it's a basic check or a standard check or enhanced check. So people might find that helpful. Just have to be mindful that if you're hiring to somebody, it should be the hirer that is the deliverer of the service, not the village hall, unless the village hall itself is doing it and they are the person delivering it.
Yeah, it's very rare, well, it's quite rare for the village hall themselves to be putting on the activity. I mean, it's the role of a village hall to be there to provide a premises. It isn't necessarily their responsibility, or their objects of their charity is not necessarily to provide the activities themselves. That's quite rare, unless you're a community centre and it's written into your objects that you are going to provide these services. But on the whole, village halls, the objects, their charitable objects, is to actually provide a safe environment in their building. They've got to make sure that they're adhering to all the legal requirements, policies and procedures in place. It's insured, it's safe for people to then hire it. So that's the responsibility of the trustees. So the people hiring the hall will sign the hiring agreement, which will have a safeguarding paragraph in there, expecting that anybody hiring the hall will then have to adhere to safeguarding issues. They may have their own safeguarding policy, you would hope that they would, but lots of smaller groups, local groups, may not have one. But if it's a bigger organisation, say a Scouts group or somebody like that, or the WI, they should have sort of their own national standardised safeguarding policies in place. But you can't assume that all the groups that are going to hire the hall will have safeguarding policies. So when they hire the hall, they should, and it should be pointed out to them that they agree to everything in the hiring agreement, because it is a contract and they are expected to sign it. And that is, in effect, a legal contract like any other legal contract. So if they break what they've signed up to in law, you know, they are responsible anyway. But they, as a village hall trustee, if it was ever challenged in the courts, and if it was the case that you hadn't informed your hirer that they are meant to do ABC, you know, including safeguarding, all these rules and regulations and terms and conditions of the hire, that's their responsibility to get that part correct. So if your model hiring agreement is a very, very vital part of managing the hall legally, because then it means that you're instructing all of your hirers what they can and can't do. Once they sign it, they are agreeing to your terms and conditions. So if anything goes wrong, could be any health and safety issue, safeguarding issue, failure to turn the oven off when they leave the premises and it causes a fire, anything like that, it's their legal responsibility. They have signed up to the terms and conditions of your hall. So that is a key thing to make sure you've got a very comprehensive hiring agreement. There is a model one, by the way. So if you haven't got one, if you feel as a village hall you haven't got a very good hiring agreement, you can purchase one from us, which is the ACRE model. I know it involves buying it, but it is a very, very comprehensive document that covers every potential clause, you know, from Wi-Fi, misuse of Wi-Fi, rubbish, litter, everything up to health and safety and safeguarding. You know, it's worth investing in that document, because at least you will know you've covered all the issues that are going to be relevant to the trustees. Trustees will have fulfilled their duty of care to the charity.
Helena, I think Marion said, how much is the trustee the model hiring policy?
It's £35 plus VAT, and we, yeah.
Helena, I've got a question which you may or may not know the answer to. Is it the trustee's responsibility to make sure that anybody that is running a group for children or vulnerable adults has a DBS check? I don't want to bang on about DBS checking, but so although the trustees themselves might not need one, it's the person that's delivering the group. Do we know if you know, where the line is drawn between how much trustees need to be aware or have sight of a DBS of anybody delivering in their hall?
I don't think they have to have sight of the DBS, unless they're delivering, if they're delivering direct services. Is Alison? They do, you say?
No, they don't.
Was it Alison?
You shouldn't actually look at somebody's DBS because of the legalities of it. Only those individuals that requested it should be able to view it. And so therefore, you know, you'd be putting yourself in a position, if you were asking for somebody's DBS, what you have to do is ask them for confirmation that they have, that the individuals are appropriately DBS checked. So it's up to individuals. It's only the employer that is allowed to look at the DBS check. So obviously, if you are employing somebody to deliver something in your village hall, that's a different matter, because then you're allowed to look at it and request it. But you should, in the ACRE agreement, it will say that, you know, you've got the appropriate DBS check for delivering whatever it is that the person's hiring it for.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, Alison. But also, when they're signing the model, the hiring agreement that you have, the clause in the hiring agreement will say something along the lines of, and you adhere to our safeguarding policy. So the policy won't be written up in the hiring agreement, but they are signing up to say, we are adhering to your safeguarding policy. So you would give them a safeguarding policy, or make sure that they have sight of the safeguarding policy as well. Once they've signed the hiring agreement, then the responsibility is totally in their hands.
Yeah.
And you as trustees have done everything within your power that legally that you need to do. So it's in that, again, that hiring agreement is the crucial thing, and having your safeguarding policy up to date, and make sure that it is available and that the hirers are given a copy of that. There is an updated ACRE information sheet, the one that Emily mentioned earlier, that's been updated, and we received it last night, just called Safeguarding. It's information sheet 5 called Safeguarding. And in the back of that, the appendix is a model safeguarding policy for village halls. So you don't have to go rooting on the internet looking for one. There's some fantastic, brilliant safeguarding policies online, but this one will be targeted specifically for village halls, which you probably wouldn't find online. So it's just to say that you don't have to reinvent the wheel or use one that is more appropriate or not appropriate for village halls. You need to have the one that's for the village halls. So you know, contact us afterwards if you do want to purchase a copy of that. Unfortunately, it's like all of the information sheets. Those of you are aware of the village hall service, ACRE produce 42 information sheets and model documents. So the model hiring agreement is one of those model documents, but the generic information sheets, there are 42 different ones, and they're all £10 plus VAT. And again, there's one on health and safety, there's one on fire safety, amongst others as well. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, it is all there. There are model documents to use. So any more questions around that?
I think, oh, sorry.
Sorry, can I ask about, you haven't really given us very clear ideas of where you report to. I know the police, if
I'm
it's
doing
really
that.
serious.
I'm going to do that now.
Right, okay. I'll go away then.
No, that we're getting to that bit. Don't worry. Shall we get on with the last part of the presentation then, Helena? I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily.
That's the one. So can everyone see that, your responsibilities as trustees? Yeah. So I think probably I'm going to be reiterating quite a bit of what Helena's just said actually now, but it's good for you to hear it twice. So trustees should ensure their charity provides a safe environment and protects staff, volunteers, and anyone who comes into contact with it from abuse or maltreatment of any kind. So just remember your own volunteers who are part of your trustee and charity group, that like Sarah, who's an employee, you know, just keep your eyes open for them and make sure that you're happy with them as your employees, that they are not being subjected to any form of abuse or maltreatment. And that's obviously taken from the Charity Commission website. So trustees should take steps to ensure no one who comes into contact with their charity suffers distress or harm, as well as safeguarding children and adults at risk. So again, that's partly the health and safety element, like Helena was saying, making sure that no one who comes into contact with the village hall is going to suffer from harm, but also, you know, in the capacity of abuse, making sure you're keeping your eyes open, that people using your village hall, nobody's showing signs of abuse of any kind, and if they are, safeguarding is everybody's responsibility and you need to follow up on that. So this is the bit Helena was talking about that just came in last night. So yes, bear with me. All committee members need to take the following actions. So sign the Hall's declaration of acceptance of office. So Helena should have one of those available. Appoint 1 or 2 people to be the safeguarding leads responsible for ensuring safeguarding practices and procedures are in place. Comply with DBS criteria, which we've gone over, for obtaining suitable checks. Support the responsible person to develop relevant policies and to regularly review them. So again, like Helena says, we do have model policies that can be purchased if you should need them. Check that the Hall's hiring agreement is in line with safeguarding policies, and that's just what Helena was saying about making sure once that Hall hiring agreement has been signed, providing they've had a chance to see the safeguarding policy, then it's their responsibility to keep everyone safe. However, as I say, if you see something suspicious, it's still your responsibility to report it. Ensure safe recruiting practices are in place, and that's going back to the DBS checks again. You know, don't just hire you know, your next door neighbour to be the caretaker, or if you are going to hire your next door neighbour, put them through a safer recruiting process. Get hold of references. Don't you know, do it properly. Don't just hire, you know, your next door neighbour because you think it'll be easier. Still go through all the safer recruiting processes. When I was putting this in, I was thinking, well, you know, yes, a caretaker might not have a great deal of contact with the groups using the Hall, but who's to say that the caretaker isn't called in to a yoga group or a play group to fix you know, to fix the heating or get the heating to work, or you know. So yeah, I think that's just something to think about when you're thinking, does my caretaker need a DBS check? I know Alison's saying about providing. Maybe, Alison, you might clear this up for me, but I feel that if they're going to go into that room and there's vulnerable people around...
No, they won't, because they are not providing anything to those vulnerable people.
I get what you're saying, Alison, but I'm really struggling with that.
No, it isn't, because if what you basically do is you go to the person that will be DBS checked, for conversation. They won't be, if they're fixing the heating whilst that is running, then
they won't be left alone with children.
In there, they shouldn't be. You shouldn't be allowed to be opening if you can't provide heating for that session. So they shouldn't be there when a group is running.
Right. I suppose heating wasn't a good example, but yeah. I get what you're saying, Alison.
The person themselves has to be in that position of delivery of care or have responsibility for that person to have an enhanced DBS check. The caretaker isn't delivering it. They might be in a room with somebody, but they really shouldn't be. So as a Hall person, you know, you really shouldn't be allowing your caretaker to be there when it's being hired by somebody.
Sorry, Rosemary Rose is saying something. I just wanted to say the village halls element isn't my area, so it's the safeguarding bit. But so I probably shouldn't have used heating as an example. Rosemary,
can I say something? We have a preschool that uses our hall every day, and with Ofsted, nobody can go in. You cannot go into that group at all. Even if there was an emergency, they would have to leave. You cannot allow anybody in that building, and she won't let you through the door. Even if I wanted to pick up an envelope or drop something off, it's really strict. So they would be at fault for allowing the caretaker to come in. So
Correct.
it really
I
is
agree.
very, very strict these days. So there's no wandering in of anybody, even to read a gas meter. It is not allowed. So that's straight back to the provider of that service, I think you'll find.
Right. I apologise. That's what I've yeah. I didn't. My area is not the village halls and
I
things.
think anything to do with children's groups, they have this. You know, that they cannot let anybody at all, woman or male, come in.
Yeah. Helena. Helena. Did you want? Helena?
I think the only, I know what Emily is saying. I think there may be circumstances. I'm not talking about the enhanced DBS, but whatever levels there were, Alison, I can't remember, but the very basic one. I think there could be circumstances. For example, if you've got, say, a community centre and you've got an on-site caretaker or somebody who oversees as there could be several activities going on at one time, but the people coming to these activities can be walking through communal areas, or there could be more than one lot of toilets, for example. So the people running those events in the various rooms within the community centre may not necessarily be overseeing what people do if they're going to other parts of the building or going to the toilet. So I can see that there could be circumstances where that person who is maybe a caretaker on site would need to have some sort of basic DBS.
No, it would be it'd be the absolute responsibility of the person providing the service to that person. If that person is so vulnerable that they can't walk to the toilet on their own, go to the toilet and come out on their own, then the individual should be accompanying them to the toilet and making sure that they are safe. If they're in that vulnerable category, just because if you think about it, if you are in a theatre, for example, or the cinema, and a child goes to the toilet without their parent during the film and comes back, those people that work in that cinema will not be DBS checked.
Okay. Yeah.
They just won't, because they are not providing a service to those individuals. So that Rosemary was talking about the play group that is run. She's absolutely correct. The responsibility lies with the person running the group. And if you think your child or that vulnerable person could be at risk whilst doing anything under your care, then you have to make sure that they are looked after and supported appropriately, like going to the toilet, for example, so that they don't wander out the building. It is not the caretaker's responsibility for that, and the caretaker themselves does not require a DBS check. It's a lot for people to get their heads around. It genuinely is. I totally understand it. I've had the same arguments with heads of NHS trusts that want to CRB everybody, and I'm like going, no. It just doesn't happen. It does take a lot to get around it, but there isn't really the only time any staff should be DBS checked in a village hall setting is where they themselves are delivering the service that falls into that category.
The service they're delivering is providing the venue. I think that's really, really useful, Alison, but I think there's a slight grey area, and I know what Emily's thinking. It's not necessarily people that can't physically get to the toilets or very young children. It could be a young adult that may be vulnerable to being groomed, or somebody who may be...
But as the individual, I totally understand. So what you're saying is the caretaker could go and have a chat to them. Well, actually, that's the responsibility of the person that child or vulnerable adult is under the care of, to make sure that doesn't happen, that caretaker doesn't go. It's not the caretaker that you need to be doing. It's the individual's responsibility to ensure that those individuals are not placed in those
vulnerable positions.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not the caretaker's responsibility to have a DBS check. Yes, of course, that caretaker is actively involved in the sessions and could be sitting down with that individual, or taking individuals to the toilet, for example, and having opportunities on their own to be having those types of conversations or building that relationship.
I think, I think we need to skip the next slide, because I put about going through DBS. I totally get what you're saying, Alison, and I understand that you're an expert. I just, there's certain areas that I don't feel comfortable with, and I know what you're saying is correct, and it's the law and what have you, but some I'm thinking, oh, I wonder whether, you know, they should have extra bits. But anyway, let's move on.
Before you move on, I know that Charlotte raised her hand. I'm not sure if she still has a question.
Yeah, it was just, this may further confuse the situation or may clarify it, but we looked into this because we had some real concerns. We're looking at taking over a community managed library, and we felt or thought that the volunteers who ran that would have to be DBS checked, and we were strongly advised that they wouldn't, again because it's not regular contact with a group, it's people coming in and out, and presumably if there's young or vulnerable people coming in, they would be with a carer or a parent or school, etc. So I don't know if that clarifies it in any way, but it's not, it's I think it's the regular contact, isn't it, or the opportunity to kind of relationship build with them. And in a library is perhaps similar to the cinema situation, you haven't got that opportunity, have you, because it's more ad hoc.
Yeah,
It's useful.
We went back and forth with this because we were really uncertain that was correct, but Derbyshire County Council I think at one point it was like everybody was checked just in case, and I think as Alison obviously said and is an expert, we've moved away into a more kind of realistic and reasonable view to it.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Alison. I'm going to go away and do some research, and so that I get it right next time. The next slide is a link. So when you get your slides, there's a link there to safeguarding duties for charity trustees. Their charity commission says that the wider compliance casework shows that problems in charities often result from basic failures by trustees to understand and fulfil their legal duties. So that's why reading this page online and getting yourself familiar with your duties as a trustee is essential, really. It goes on to say that in areas of safeguarding, it can include failing to recognise that your beneficiaries might be at risk or vulnerable in certain situations, or not taking proper steps to protect others who come into contact with your charity, such as staff members and volunteers. So I know one thing we have been talking about is in relation to for example your staff being the ones that maybe could carry out the abuse, but also it's about making sure your staff are safe and are not put in any situations where they could be accused of something, like Alison was saying about the going to the toilets and what have you, making sure your staff are never put in a position where they could be accused of anything. So that would include making sure that the group hiring the room is doing what Alison was saying and is taking their child, young person, or watching them go to the toilet and come back, to make sure nobody intervenes on the way and no accusations can be made against your staff. So yeah, just remembering it the other way as well as outwardly, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. So again, this is taken from the Charities Commission. Whether you're a trustee, director, officer, manager, paid professional or volunteer, if your club, association or business works with or provides services to children and young people, and I would say vulnerable adults as well, you will have a statutory responsibility for safeguarding children and their welfare. And you must understand what your organisations and your personal responsibilities are. So again, another reason to go and have a good read of the Charities Commission page. And just another little reminder there, safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So this is the bit Helena was talking about earlier, so I'll try not to spend too much time on it. The safeguarding policy So the Charity Commission explains that the charity must make sure all trustees, staff and volunteers, partners and beneficiaries are aware of the policies. They all need to know how to apply them. And I'm just going to, it's a little bit long-winded, but I'm just going to read to you the additional bit of information that was on this Charity Commission website. So, assuming the organisation has a fully drafted safeguarding policy in line with the guidance, they could just insert an additional term into their standard hiring agreements to state that the hirer agrees to adopt, adhere to and implement the charity's safeguarding policy for the duration of their hire. So that's what we were talking about, making sure it's stated in your hiring agreement, and that the people have view of a copy of your safeguarding agreement. Then once they've signed their hiring agreement, then that the responsibility is on them. That's correct, Helena? Just wanted to double check there.
That's right, Emily. And really, if a charity isn't or hasn't got a policy in place, safeguarding policy, and hasn't made it clear to their hirers, they're not fulfilling their duty. And I mean, whether there was a serious safeguarding issue whilst there was a hiring, I mean, potentially the charity could be, you know, put as a criminal prosecution because they're failing to have their governance in place. So again, you've got that, you know, if you were insured for public liability insurance, you would not be covered because you have not complied with your legal requirements. So insurance is only there as, you know, if you've got everything and your governance in place correctly. And if you fail to do that, then you have a failure in your legal duties. So your insurance may not cover if you know, God forbid, there was a criminal prosecution against the charity itself. Never heard of it happening to a village hall, but it sounds a bit you know, fear-mongering, but it basically it can come down to that. If it was a serious offence, you know, something happened while a hirer was using your hall and you hadn't informed them about safeguarding, they hadn't signed and agreed to adhere to, you know, if you haven't got those policies in place, then you are failing as charity trustees of the village hall. So just to be aware of that. I won't say any more, Emily, it'll be getting into but the safeguarding policy is crucial to all of this.
I think somebody just popped up asking how much is the safeguarding policy again? So that's the £10 plus VAT, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the information sheet, and the policy itself is just in the appendix at the back. It's not a big information sheet. It's just called safeguarding. Basically, it just covers the key issues, and then the appendix is the model safeguarding policy, which is for village halls. So yeah, it is £10 VAT.
And sending out that, if you're sending out an email hiring agreement, sending that out as an you know, as an additional, so the person has in theory they've read it, you know, at least they're signing to say they've read it, then yeah, it's their responsibility.
Another thing that, yeah, sorry, Emily, another thing that trustees, whenever they're talking about any governance issues, or when they're talking about developing policies or implementing policies, please remember to minute it, because when you have your village hall management committee meetings, obviously minutes are taken. So this is where, you know, it comes into play. It's important to have that paper trail, you know, when decisions were made, when policies were introduced, when they were reviewed, when they were updated. Because again, if it ever came to a court case, you would be asked to provide minutes of your meetings, how you came to decide upon the actions that you take. So it's paper trail, it's red tape, but it is crucial to protect the charity's best interests. And you don't want to be in a position where, you know, you think, okay, we're covered, our insurance cover will cover it. You may be in a position, if it's negligence, if it's poor governance, then it may be a case where your insurance policy may not cover any legal case against the charity. So, I mean, it's common sense. It's all health and safety is the same. This is just another addition, a crucial addition to health and safety, but it's following the procedures. I mean, there is guidance there. There are model policies, there's model health and safety policies, there's model fire policies, and there's the safeguarding policy.
The next slide, Emma, just covers basically what Helen has just said. That make sure that everyone's read it, understood it, and uses the documents in the day-to-day operations. Policies and procedures must be easily accessible. So, and what Helena was saying again there, if a review of one of your policies is done, make sure that's minuted. And I do a signing sheet to make sure that all my relevant people have read all the policies at least. Well, I make sure it's at least once a year. I don't know if that's too much. So I've got a sheet to say that in 2020 XYZ read the safeguarding policy, just to make sure everything's not necessarily reviewed it, but read it and refreshed their minds. I don't know if that's overkill, but I guess it's just another thing to do that shows that everybody's adhering. So the next slide, Emma. Now this has come out in the new policy that we just received yesterday evening. It's a little bit small on the slide. I do apologise. It's probably better to go onto the Charity Commission website, but it's just a 10-step a list really of what trustee boards need to do to make sure they're doing safeguarding properly. Why are policies and procedures important? I mean, I probably don't need to tell you this. You're probably sick of policies and procedures, but it might be worth considering a digital safety policy going forwards. That's something I've had to do, and using Zoom safely and things like that. So yeah, digital safety policy. Policies keep yourself safe as well as the people using your village hall safe. They should tell users what to do if they have a safeguarding concern. Tell staff their role in safeguarding. They're based on good guidance and they're part of your safeguarding compliance, so you do need them. So research shows that abusers target organisations where there's no policies or procedures in place, which is not a nice thought. And I'm sure that doesn't, adhere to any of you lot here. Next slide. So reporting in Derbyshire. So I am whizzing through these because I know we've covered a lot of it. So basically, unless you're calling 999, unless there is immediate danger to the child, young person, or an adult, so in which case you would call 999. The other concerns, the other telephone number is on this slide. And actually, if you've ever called Derbyshire for anything, potholes, this comes up first. It says, if you have a concern about a child or young person, please press 1. If you have a concern about an adult, please press 2. So it literally is that number. And you'd ring up that number and you would explain your concerns and you'd get put through to the right department. So it might be worth having that number visible somewhere if you've got an office, or making sure you send it out to all your trustees. Because it's as easy as that. It's not hard. There's really no excuse. And then outside office hours, that's the other telephone number, the 532 600. Now, just go back one. Sorry, Emma. I was just going to say something that I found very odd when I made when I had to make a referral, unfortunately, was that they might not act on it immediately. So that's just something, I don't know, it's just something to be aware of, because depending on the concern, they might not act on it immediately. So just bear that in mind. because I found that hard to deal with myself, actually. You know, I wanted them to go and sort it out now, but they had to gather more evidence and things like that. So yeah, just bear that in mind. Okay, next one, Emma. Thanks. So I've put together a big list, hopefully, for you there to have a look at when you get the slides. One of the best websites, though, is NSPCC for children and young people. I mean, they've just got a wealth of information on there. If you're thinking about adults with disabilities or learning disabilities, it would be the scie.org.uk safeguarding, Social Care Institute for Excellence. Again, they really have got a wealth of information on there. I do an extra bit of volunteering, supporting parents and carers of children with additional needs, and that's where I go for all my information. They've got some bits and bobs of online training on there. It's a really good website. Next slide. There's another, just a few more bits of information there for when you get the slides. As NSPCC's on there again to a different page, and obviously ACRE. So there's all the different ACRE information sheets that Helen has been talking about, which are specifically aimed at village halls. Oh, Jane's going, bye-bye, Jane. So make sure, I'd just check those websites out if you can, if you're interested in safeguarding. We've also put a list here of the main ones you might need, we think you might need, the main information sheets. Obviously, sheet number 5 is the one we keep mentioning, safeguarding issues, but there's a few others there. Equality in village halls, actually we think that might need a whole different presentation because equality and diversity is a whole new minefield, really. But there's also the model hiring agreement that you can purchase from Rural Action Derbyshire, which was £35, I think, as Helena mentioned. And lastly, because we have run over time, here's Helena's Helena's details if you want to contact her at all, because she is the expert.
Not an expert. I try my best, but Emily, that's fine. Have you finished what you wanted? That's brilliant. Thank you so much for doing the presentation. That's really, really insightful. So thank you for that. It is Village Halls Week. So what's the rest of the week? This is the first day. So for the whole of the week, Emma, our communications lady, expert here, will be sending out Twitter and Facebook feeds every day. So it would be great, because this is a national campaign, so that the bigger the voice we can get out there, share these things, make sure that it's shared amongst your fellow trustees, your users, share it with whoever you think it's going to be, you know, your contact. So the more we spread the message about safeguarding, the better the impact for Safeguarding Week will be. So as well as the training today, the other part of it is to raise awareness, but also to provide all these resources to Village Hall trustees. So look on our website, there is a safeguarding page specifically for this week, and it'll stay there for the whole of the project, which goes through to March 2022. But all those links that Emily's highlighted on her slides are also on the website as well. We will, as time goes on, if there are other resources or new links to go on there, we will update that web page. We will also put up there, it's not there yet, there's a sort of model declaration of acceptance of office. So when you have a new trustee coming onto your Village Hall committee, they can sign this declaration of acceptance, which is actually saying we have received all the policies and procedures and we accept that we as trustees are going to abide by those. I think I've covered everything. I'm conscious of time, and I know people will be itching to get and have some lunch. So I'll there any other questions? Yeah, Jackie? Had you got a question, Jackie? No? Can't hear.
I was just thanking everyone for their information. So that was what I put up.
That's
very informative. Very
glad that you could all join us. If you do want the model hiring agreement or the information sheet, drop me an email or send an email to Emma. But if you've got my email, it's on the slide. It's h.stubbs@ruralactionderbyshire.org.uk. Most of you I am familiar with, but there are a few new faces that have joined us today. So yes, I think you're aware of how to contact us. The next training session I will just quickly mention is going to